listening to the Lockdown live stream, a special edition Provoke and Inspire episode.
All right. Welcome to the Provoke and Inspire podcast. Normally we have a little buffer before bringing on our guest, but our guest today, he just feels like one of us. So Shane, thank you and welcome.
I don't know if Shane, I don't know if you feel like that's a good thing or not. I mean,
that's right. Such a ragtag bunch. Yeah, great. Thanks.
Yeah. Ben's like, we feel like you're one of us, and Shane's like, I don't want to be one of you.
I don't feel like I'm one of you. Yeah, fair enough.
Anyway,
yeah.
I hope you're not discouraged by that, Shane.
Yeah.
No, I'm honored to be counted among you.
Oh, well, we'll find out after this conversation. We'll see. Who knows? Who knows where this could go? But anyway, this is the Provoke and Inspire podcast. We've had you on a few times before. Never under such dire and such a crisis as this. And so,
yeah,
needless to say, it's like it sucked everything into its gravity. Everything that we're talking about with all of our guests naturally is centered around this pandemic that's absolutely ruling the world right now. But David's going to kill me because he said, please, I think Shane will understand if I can do my random story. See, we have this little bit he does every time called David's Random Story.
Yeah, and I want the random story soundbite.
Nice.
Before. Come on.
Not
happening. All right. So Shane, I know that you used to have dreads until you sold out and became like, I don't know, commercialized or whatever.
Wow. Apparently you got some fake news going. I got to tell you what really happened.
Because I mean, I look at you, man, and I'm thinking, what bank is he working for? You know? Come on.
Is that right? Wow,
it's
that's
like,
a compliment.
yeah.
I've never been told that in my life. So thank you. Yeah.
You must be one of those venture capitalists or something. So anyway,
I've got earrings made out of bamboo from my backyard, but thank you. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. Well,
top that.
So because anyway, Luke, he used to have dreads, but then it took him he wouldn't ever wash or anything because of it. He'd like,
True.
I was with him actually in India. We were working there, and he's like, oh, I have to wash my hair, and it takes like a day for it to dry. And he was just like, I don't know if you understand this.
I never do it.
Totally.
So he would never wash his hair. And then one day we were in having this, we called it the circle of love. You understand? You know, we'd sit in a circle, and I looked at Luke and I'm like, what is going on? And it like,
uh-oh. Hey, Shane, it's me and you.
Oh, we lost. Sweet dude. Wow. This is,
we got to keep it going.
What did we say, man? The man got involved on that, I guess. Yeah. Wow.
Exactly.
Okay. So can I tell you the backstory of the dreadlocks while we're waiting?
Yeah, I'd love to hear that while the guys come back on.
Didn't do his fact checking on this, but like,
no, I bet you didn't.
I ended up going to a trip on a trip to Afghanistan. And they're like, yeah, you got to cut your dreadlocks. And I was like, oh, because, they might I'll stand out as like a American. They're like, and so I was like, man, get the scissors, let's cut it off. So,
wow.
But the fact is that, like, for a while, my wife would give me a back massage every time I would keep the short hair.
Yeah.
So that kind of was a little bit of an incentive, But it's a big commitment to I was 10 years of hair, so I'm not going to go back there. I don't think it's just a lot of work. I do miss having the pillow that was always available for the airlines, but I'm much more aerodynamic on my bike. So whatever, man. But yeah.
How long ago was that? How long ago did you change the look?
It's been a few years. Yeah.
Right.
So I cut them when I went to, for the same reason when I went to Iraq too. It's, just kind of culturally, insensitive, I think, in some places. So, or just sort of weird, so I cut them off a few times, but had like,
that's a good move.
Yeah.
Did you do much over there in that part of the world?
Yeah, I've done quite a bit. I've been to, it's changed me, man. I mean, my 2 trips to Iraq were massive. I was there for an entire month, and then went back, again for a week or so, and just massive in shaping who I am. And then had an incredible quick trip to Afghanistan to meet these young people, man, that just heroic. Wow. They're called the Afghan Peace Volunteers, and they've studied the history of nonviolence, and they're kind of proclaiming and building.
And they're from there, right? They're Afghan.
They're there. And Afghanistan's been at war for over 30 years, and it's just traumatized. Right. It's like normal. And so they're just like, no, this shouldn't be normal. And these are like 15-year-old kids, man. They're like revolutionaries. Wow. It's awesome. So, yeah.
So basically what's happening right now, guys, viewers, if you're watching, I've taken over the podcast. We've kicked Ben and David out, and it's just me and Shane.
I'm the new host here. I might be a regular now. So, yeah.
Exactly. No, I think they're having some technical difficulties. So while we're waiting to see if they can get back on, Shane, tell us how are things in your area in relation to the whole lockdown thing, coronavirus? What's going on in your area, and what have been some of the thoughts you've had during this time?
Well, like everywhere, it's total, like strange, like we woke up in a dystopian movie or something like that. It's like there's a lot of things that we're still going strong on. In fact, we've ramped up all of our food distribution, emergency services, everything we were already doing is just now kind of on steroids. And I watch my neighbors across the street just giving out hundreds of bags of food, and taking care of people. So we've got friends around the corner that are running a free clinic, a health clinic, and they also have public showers. So everybody's trying to use new protocols, but it's one of those things that I think it surfaces the best and the worst of who we are. As I heard someone say yesterday, on the darkest nights, you see the brightest stars. So there's a lot of beautiful stuff happening in the midst of it. Like my friends that are running their medical clinic, fearlessly. There's a beautiful article in the New Yorker on them, and they're just doing it. They're like, folks in the street don't have a home to quarantine in, and social distance. What's that mean when you're homeless? You find a tree to sleep under or something. Like, it just doesn't. It's not. It's different. So we're trying to. I've been saying we're trying to be both courageous and cautious, and I think this is a time where we can't let fear kind of hold us hostage to love and live in isolation from each other. At the same time, we got to be really smart and protect the people that are most vulnerable. So concerned about, the beginning of the spread of the disease in some of our prisons and Rikers and other places that, just what could happen, in the detention centers, the rise in anti-Asian violence and racism. So I've been supporting a lot of my friends that are taking initiatives on that. We posted a petition to, sensitize ourselves and call out anti-Asian racism. We've also got a petition that's out asking the government to release folks that are at risk in detention centers that are immigrants that, don't have any criminal background or whatever, but, they shouldn't be sentenced to die just for trying to escape, as asylum seekers.
Have they done that? Have they done that in the US? Because over here in Europe, they've done that in a few countries. They've released prisoners that might have been already, lined up to be released anyway. Has any of that happened in the US?
No, not to my knowledge. And we're trying to really ramp it up because that's so urgent, So, life's going on. We're doing, there's a lot of creativity that's kind of happening in the midst of it. Katie and I started posting these little videos we're going to call play and pray during the virus, so I think we got to keep our joy alive. We got to keep our hearts prayerful, but we can't let the kind of heaviness, I think, overwhelm us. While at the same time grieving the massive loss of lives and the folks who are really at risk. So I think it's a delicate dance, right? But it's at the heart of our faith, even as we approach Holy Week. We call Good Friday the day that Jesus was killed. So we've got this like kind of inherent, like kind of implicit part of our faith that realizes that life and death are sort of at war, and so are love and fear, in our world. So,
we can find the opportunities even in the darkest times and see God's goodness even in the darkest times. It's something that we were talking about actually with one of our guests recently was Dr. A.R. Bernard. And he was talking about that, about let's look at where do we see God's goodness even in these challenging times, and not just all the awful things that are happening, but also where do we see God at work and how can we join in with that? I appreciate that's something I've seen you guys doing quite a lot. And actually one thing that I've personally struggled with is it's really encouraging hearing different ways that you guys are serving in the neighborhood or also observing other people. What are they doing to help those that are hit the hardest by a crisis like this? I found it hard in my local area finding enough good opportunities to volunteer or to serve or to help out. I think it'd be really valuable if you had some ideas or tips or practical things that people can do, back home where they are, opportunities they could look for to volunteer and to help out. What would you say are some of the key places we could be helping at this time?
Totally, man. And I mean, every day we're having new ones, things that we haven't thought of. My mom just told me she's starting to sew masks, for folks that need them. So there's a lot of folks doing things like that. There's I think depending on where we are, there's probably different needs, especially between urban communities and rural. And there's different protocols and ways that we can be kind of out there depending on where we are, But I mean, I think all of us can be trying to have eyes to see, as Jesus said, for folks. It's like volunteering with Meals on Wheels to deliver meals to folks in the street. There's a lot of food distributions that, like what we're doing, that are really in need right now. We were told over 100 agencies in Philly have had to shut down, sometimes because they rely on seniors, as volunteers and stuff. So they've just kind of had to close down their operations. So others of us, it means we really need to ramp it up and do it really with new precaution, but, do it nonetheless. Riding folks in prison. I think some of it's just going, man, like, who might I be able to call and check on or just catch up with, like recognize that there's a space right now that's weird and different, but it also, just like you said, it's certainly got a dark side to all of this, but there's also in the middle of it. I've been saying God works through the cracks of everything, and so I think right now we can find the cracks, and I mean, one of those in the U.S. So there's a lot. Hey guys, welcome back.
Welcome back.
I promoted myself to host and was asking for a paycheck, man. So
exactly.
But dag, now I'm out of a job.
First time in the Provoke and Inspire podcast history that I've not been part of an episode. That might have been why the numbers were so good. Oh, I might be going again.
I confess I was freaking out, so I'm glad you guys are back.
Sorry, Shane. Go ahead.
That's okay. Well, I gave the whole backstory to my my loss of dreadlocks and whatnot. But, when we were just talking about like things that we see, opportunities that we see in the middle of this. And I mean, even in the funk, I mean, here we've seen all executions are stopped in the U.S. right now. And so, I mean, obviously other folks are dying, but you're going, man, maybe all this death gives us a chance to be more sensitive to life. And so I'm praying for some of these governors that have been carrying out executions that maybe they won't resume. Maybe that's one of those things that we just rethink in the middle of all this death is like, let's not resume executions, in our country. So this year we'll see the lowest executions we've probably had in modern history since we've resumed the death penalty. Because, folks can't go to court. They can't meet their lawyers or whatever. But I think there's all kinds of, like, there's a shaking happening. And so some stuff's going to fall away. And I hope some of it, gives us a chance to sort of prune ourselves and realize what matters and what doesn't, and some changes that might be, temporary right now, but maybe we want to make them permanent.
Shane, we have a lot of people in our missional family around the world, and they're in really tough places right now, like in Spain, in Madrid, in France, and Russia. I mean, we have a girl that was in hospital, and she's doing better now, but it doesn't, they didn't test her, but she had a fever and a cough and all of that. So, it's kind of obvious that it's probably the virus, but, and so it's just really a time when your faith has to be real, can't be just theoretical. It just can't be slogans. And So there's a lot of people right now and that listen to this podcast and watch this podcast in situations like that. And what would you say to them? What would you tell them right now?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think first of all, there's also seems like this is a time of sort of theological pruning, that we're seeing maybe parts of our theology are not very alive, or maybe the container that we put God into isn't big enough to hold some of this. And I mean, it doesn't take a pandemic to realize that. I've had friends that, have a 7-year-old girl that gets sexually abused or raped, and someone tells them, well, God had that happen for a reason. And
Terrible.
they're like, I don't think that, so I think people are wrestling with how does our faith inform how we interpret this, and there's folks that surely are going to have some like whacked out toxic theology that this is God's judgment. I mean, someone even said that in the US, like, and others, I think it's just going to be a time where we've got to like really lean in to God and to each other and say, God's with us in the middle of this suffering. And that's certainly a consistent thread that you see all through Scripture, and perfectly, I think, embodied in Jesus, that he comes, is born in the middle of a as a refugee in the middle of a genocide. He's executed on a cross. Like, he entered into the suffering of the world, even to the point of saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? So, I mean, like, Jesus felt the like long loneliness so much that God experienced the absence of God. So, I mean, there's our faith is robust and has space for pain and for doubt, and even that loneliness that Jesus felt on the cross.
Yeah. So, you've seen there's so many different kinds of responses to this, and you see various representations of Christians at a time like this. And you mentioned that there's the potential for some really odd theology. You see some, pastors in churches saying, we're not going to social distance and we don't believe in all that. And then the media comes against that. I'm listening to the sports radio that I listen to sometimes, and the afternoon host does more politics and daily life rather than sports. But he was, again, kind of railing against that theodicy, that idea that, well, this is God. He's doing this. He's involved in this. And, he tries to be quite partial and fair. And so he was even mentioning people who are using this as like, there's environmental benefits to this. And this is the earth doing that. How can we represent Jesus well at a time like this? Like, how can we be, obviously maintain the social responsibility, but how would he have us act at a time like this that would bring people to him and not push people away?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think that it, when I say God works through the cracks of everything, I think that's exactly it's a good way of understanding that. It's not that God necessarily made the crack, right? But that God's like moving in the funk of the human condition. So I even think of like some of the real dark spots of Scripture, like David and Bathsheba. David raped a woman named Bathsheba and had her husband killed, Uriah killed in the battlefield. And I look at that and I go, whoa, that's pretty clearly like not God's perfect will. Like, David made some really bad choices out of his own sin and his own brokenness. But through the cracks of all that, David does at a point repent. He has a child with Bathsheba, has a child that goes on to be a part of the lineage, Solomon, the lineage of Jesus unfolds. So I think that, like, right now, in the middle of this, we can see so much of people rising to the occasion. You even in some of the hardest spots, you see people singing to each other. You see the courage of folks in the front lines as medical folks, folks that are standing up for neighbors in ways that they haven't before. So in some ways, I think this just surfaces who we really are. It's kind of like holding a mirror up to the world right now and saying what's important, as I heard a bishop say yesterday, is not just if we make it through the pandemic, but how we make it through. Like, how do we live love in this moment?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I asked Luke to ask the next question. He bailed, but he's back. Our internet is really struggling in the pandemic. But Luke, go ahead.
Thanks. Shane, I've been thinking a lot about some of this stuff that you were talking about. Justice, doing righteousness for for the poor and for those in need. And the Bible talks so much about that you got Proverbs saying that God honors the right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. You got prophets, Isaiah, Amos, talking about how it's more important to do righteousness, to do justice. And then Jesus' example himself in often caring for the poor or going to those that were in most in need. I think over the years I've seen or heard or read from you a theology of understanding God's justice, understanding how much he cares about righteousness and justice. And this particular time, I think, has brought that afresh to people, and they're thinking again about that. What can I do? How can I help? Could you talk a little bit more about that, about God, that aspect of God's character where he just loves justice, caring for the poor, caring for the needy? How do you see that in Scripture, and how do you see that in God's character?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's over 2,000 verses of the Bible that talk about just this: God's heart for the poor, liberating the oppressed, advocating for the vulnerable. So that's, I mean, it's all through there. Even, I mean, you think at the very beginning of this story, Exodus, is about God rescuing a group of slaves, the Hebrew people, out of their slavery in Egypt and forming a new society, a new community that would be a light to the world, and it's about liberation. And you think of Jesus's manifesto as he launches his public life and says, I've come to preach good news to the poor, and then even up to Matthew 25, when Jesus gives his account of the final judgment. And according to Jesus, it's not, just a doctrinal test, but we'll be asked, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was a stranger, did you welcome me in? When I was sick, did you take care of me? So this is really, I mean, at the very, very heart of our faith. It can't get much more explicit than what you did to the least of these, you did unto me. Or as Hebrews says, we're to remember those who are in prison and those who suffer as if it was us ourselves. So it's all through there, that caring for the widow and the orphan, as James says, is the religion that God honors. And so that's but I think sometimes we end up going, oh, that just sounds like the social gospel. It's just social justice. And you go, no, I mean, like, this is what I think is what we've done is we've turned sin into such a personal thing, and salvation is just personal.
Yeah. That
we miss a whole part of the whole story, which is that God's redeeming the world, and sin has affected our society. I mean, the legacy of slavery and racism. I mean, God wasn't just redeeming individuals in the Exodus story. God's saving a people and challenging the empire. So it doesn't have to be either or. I mean, I believe in a personal God. I believe in personal salvation. I believe we've all got our sins that need healing in our personal lives, but God's also healing our streets. God's healing our world. And if our gospel is social and not personal, I think we're missing a whole part of it. And if it's just personal and doesn't have social ramifications, we're also missing a whole part of it. So on our front door, it says, God, heal our hearts, heal our streets, heal our world. And that's kind of what we're aiming for.
Well, it's like in James, where it says that real faith is going to involve action of love and practical caring for people. Is that what you're talking about, Shane?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, aren't these like two sides of the scissors, right? Like faith and works. These things that we sometimes divorce are like two sides of the coin. Or I think the scissors things good. They work together, and when you take them apart, they don't work very well. And a lot of times, I think what happens in history is we get lopsided. We overemphasize one thing at the cost of another. And I think it's sometimes like if you run your car off the right side of the road, you yank the wheel, and then you run off the left side of the road. And that's been kind of our battle between faith and works, and the social gospel and evangelical. And we got to hold these things together, and they're not either or. I mean, I think that we can proclaim Jesus. We can, have this faith that is deeply personal, and also goes that's why I care about the world. God loves the world. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you spend time with someone, you start to feel their heart. And it's when I really spend time with Jesus, he gives me his heart, and I have to care. It's not even when I'm so selfish and such a self-centered person, I start to cry. I start to feel, the way he does about the people around me. Right now I'm in New Zealand, and you don't have the poverty like you'll have in maybe some of the inner cities, Philadelphia, or there's so many places, endless. But here you have so many people alone. I mean, there's so many people that are alone. We have a month-long lockdown here, and they're all alone. I mean, and their best friend is their a pet, a cat or a dog, and it's just so broken. And so then you think, how can I reach out to these people? But but I've also been thinking, is this whole crisis that we're going through, is it kind of like shaking up the church in a good way? It's like, it's not about giant meetings on a Sunday morning for an hour, but it's about real relationship. I'm just wondering if that's going to be some of the positives that are going to come from this terrible thing that we're going through. Is what is a church really? You know what I mean?
totally. Yeah.
And also I've been thinking about humility. Like, man, I don't think God wanted this evil to come. God does not create viruses. He died because of this kind of brokenness. But I think he can use terrible things, and I just wonder if there needs to be some humility in my life that hasn't been there, in the Big C church, and also, what is it that it motivates me? Is it so that I can have these big events, and I can write about it, and do interviews? You know what I mean by that? It's just like, what is real? What is important? What is the thing that drives me? And I'm hoping that this crisis will bring humility to the body of Christ, and start us on the right path. Kind of like, well, I'm praying that this can end quick, because I want to have, myself, I want to have more urgency. I mean, I'm still reaching out to people as much as you can in isolation, but that's what I'm feeling. What do you think about that?
Yeah, totally. I think of this season that many of us remember as Lent, before Easter, and a lot of Christians do different things. Some people give up alcohol, or they give up caffeine or meat, or, whatever. But it's almost created this particular time of inwardness, and of releasing some things. And I think what happens during those times is you really begin to value things differently. You begin to ask questions about, maybe what can I let go of, and what do I cling to? So maybe during this season this season where we're kind of quarantined, we have a deeper hunger for community, and we realize, like, man, I mean, after this, I sure don't think I'm going to be doing much screen time, like, let's look into the eyes of
for
people.
Sure.
Let's build relationships.
Right.
So you have this kind of hunger, and that's what fasting does. You go without food, and then, man, you appreciate food and the taste and the gift of it. And in some ways, this is creating a mandatory fast on community, and we're creating virtual community, but I think that can never replace real community. So I think it's exactly right. You start to think, like, I think we do need to begin to shape our language a little different, so we're not talking about social isolation. We're talking about physical distancing, in order to keep people safe. We're physically distant, but I think we need to be spiritually present, and we need to be very socially connected in any creative ways that we can. So church services that are doing all these different things to connect people, and new relationships that are forming, old ones that are being reinvigorated, because we just, we don't call people, we don't write letters. Maybe we can start doing that again. These are actually healthy practices. And I think some of the virtual community has sort of cluttered our lives rather than, enriching them.
It's weird, because it's almost like you love that online stuff so much, here you go. And in a weird sort of way, it's like, that's all we have now. And it's almost took that. It's almost like if you have this addiction to fast food and then that's all you're then allowed to eat. And that's almost the best lesson in never wanting to eat it again. Right. And so in a weird way, it's like, yeah, we're all stuck online now, but it's exhausting. And like, I was already addicted before, but now I feel even more motivated to like, I need real community. You know, we were saying that if there was 1,000 online ministries before, there's like 100,000 online evangelistic ministries now. And if anything, it's like, I hope what this does in my heart is produce a sense of, man, we were given what we wanted in a sense. This is what we're all heading towards, this seclusion and this addiction to digital realities. It's almost kind of giving us a taste of what it would be like if that was all that was left. And hopefully this can be a catalyst to say, no, let's pray we never are in a situation where we have to rely on the internet this much, because my gosh, it is exhausting, at least from my perspective.
Well, another thing I've had to do is cook, and I'm literally, you know, I'm more about like ordering at restaurants.
Yeah.
Even when I didn't,
you're good at that, David. I've seen
even
that.
even when I was in university, I had no money, but I still, you know, just had to go out, even though I had no money. I don't know how it works, but I know you're not that way, Shane, because you're more of a hippie and you probably raise your own vegetables and all that kind of stuff. But
I don't think you raise vegetables.
I package them, slaughter the chickens. I don't know what you do, but for me,
I've got my backyard chickens back there. I'm rocking some serious eggs through this pandemic. Yeah.
So you don't slaughter the chickens like Anya's wife. You're more a you're nice to the
Anya's
chicken.
wife.
You have a question? Because you have
Anya's no, but I guess what I'm just saying is I just have to cook and stuff, and I'm not a cooker really. I used to make make coffee. That was about it. So I don't know. That's really not deep. It's not like anything spiritually.
David,
but I just wanted to throw that in. You guys are so heavy sometimes, and I just had to bring in the cooking aspect, because I know a lot of people are listening to me. You guys have never cooked in your whole life, and now you're stuck in your apartment. You're having to rollerblade around your apartment. And you're having to cook,
right?
And this is hard, and that's all I want to say.
That's true. I had to learn to make pie on Sunday. And
because
I did
David
it.
David is the king of this.
All right, I do have a question. So Shane, what do you think about these guys, these televangelists who are offering for $91, you can buy this stuff that will help you not get the virus? And what do you think about these celebrities sitting in their hot tubs, putting out YouTube videos, telling everyone that it's cool to be to isolate and all that? What do you think of those people?
I think judge not lest you be judged. You know, I mean, it's nuts.
Off record. It's
nuts. Like Jim Baker. You know, he went to jail for like misusing money and all this. You know, and now he's like somehow he got another TV show and he's selling like this silver drink that you get, and now he's getting sued, you know. So I think you know that seems justified, but I just think it's, you know, people are always going to try to exploit a situation and, you know, people's pain, and, you know, I make money off of it. I think whether you're a, you know, big pharmaceutical company or you're a televangelist, you're probably going to figure out how to like make money off of a pandemic. But I think, you know, what hopefully this can do for many of us is just work our muscles of our empathy and our compassion, you know, and stir something in us that sensitizes us to life. And that's my hope, you know. I mean, that's not a like there's plenty of ways that we try to distance ourselves from pain and from people who are suffering. And there's going to be people that I just saw a retreat that you can go with these 30 people that all get tested, and you can go to this like private resort, and there's probably televangelists there, you know. But like, I think where would Jesus be? Jesus is moving into the pain of the world. Like Jesus
Absolutely.
And so like, you know, that's what should be different about us that follow Jesus, is we're not trying to escape the pain. We're trying to like carry each other's burdens and move near to the pain of the world.
Yeah, awesome.
Shane, you know, I came across some statistics just yesterday that I'd heard of, but just seeing the numbers really got me thinking. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. And I want to word this carefully because I don't want to in any way make light of the coronavirus reality and situation, how fast it's growing and spreading, and the lives that are being lost. It's tragic. But when the statistics basically compared the coronavirus deaths sort of from January to March with deaths for other causes. And so you get numbers like, I mean, I think today coronavirus is 46,000 roughly deaths. But then they were comparing it with stuff like the suicides, people dying by suicide, 250,000, HIV AIDS, 390,000, hunger, 2.5 million. You mentioned the other time you came on our podcast, you talked about the whole thing of if you're gonna fight for policy for life, let it be for across the board that we fight for life. But abortion, of course, is another one that's like 10 million right now. The numbers are just crazy. And what it made me think is life has stopped right now because a virus is spreading. And the stuff that the governments are doing are right. We see how it's spreading. We need to self-isolate. We need to do these things. But the amount of effort we've put into this particular, crisis we're in, it just made me think, should we not be doing the same level or more for things like 2.5 million dying of hunger, or even 250,000 dying of suicide in the last 3 months? And I know that that's something that, I mean, you've given your life to a lot of these causes. And I just wonder if, as a society, being more sensitized to these things right now, as you were just saying, should we, when we come out of this, be going, actually, there are a number of other issues that we should be doing as much effort as we are doing to try to stop the coronavirus? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So first of all, what a great thing it is that love is not a limited resource, and that compassion, there's no scarcity. We're not going to run out of compassion, And so that's why, when I talk about the death penalty and someone goes, but what about abortion? You go like, right. You care about more than one thing at once, like we, and that's where I think what we've got to do is care about life in a very consistent way. And hopefully the pandemic can be one more thing that sensitizes us to that. But and so I think we can simultaneously grieve the lives that are being lost right now to the coronavirus. At the same time, we had 5 people killed this weekend within a few miles of my house by guns. We had 5 people shot on one block, not too far from here. One of them was a 2-year-old. So like, we do need to grieve that. And I think many of us have been saying, we've had a pandemic of gun violence in our country that is a public health crisis that's claiming 100 lives a day to guns. And we've seen very little emergency, action on that. When Ebola took a handful of lives, we got all the spinach or whatever it was off the shelf. And you're like, but man, like, more people have died from guns in my lifetime than all of the wars of U.S. history combined. And so we need to be sensitive, I think, to all of these things that are taking life. Anytime a life is cut short, we lose a part of God's image in the world. Every human, being made in the image of God. So, I think that we've got to be, consistent advocates for life. So certainly right now, in the pandemic, we can remember, it was some of the early monastic folks, the Christians, that started the hospitals. And so, even as we're caring for people now, that compassion that helped us survive other pandemics, like Christians have been on the front lines of that. We've been on the front lines of some issues of life, but on other ones like gun violence and the death penalty, at least here in the States, we've been the obstacles to life and rather than the champions of it.
Yeah, one thing you said the last time we spoke is that proximity can be our enemy, right? We're too distant from the realities of the things that we talk about, and so they can remain, coffee table conversation, but not something we give our lives to. It's kind of interesting and fitting that now we are in a situation where nowhere is really safe, right? That illusion of distance, right? Even though that's what we're being told to do, the illusion of distance is now it's a reality. Like, it doesn't matter where I am, doesn't matter rich, poor, now I'm going to not necessarily suffer equally. And that's a part of this conversation that I think is worth talking about too, right? It's like, the things that we're suffering in so much of the Western world is just a joke. Like, okay, I can't go inside of the Starbucks. I just have to go through the drive-through. It's like, we're not, the suffering is trivial, honestly. And there's a lot of good that can come from the lessons we're learning through this. But I just find it interesting that now that self-interest is what's sparking the global reaction to it. And that's sad to me. We don't care about these other issues as much, because if they don't affect me, my proximity allows me to be apathetic. And so many Christians have been awakened to suffering because of this crisis. And as Luke says, you'll see people post a list like that, and there'll be all these arguments because people can't recognize nuance and they create false dichotomies. Like, I can't take the coronavirus serious and also think it's bad that abortion is happening every day and I don't seem to do anything about it. Like you said, love can be spread across both conditions. But what do I do to keep my heart alive and awakened to the death that will continue even once this pandemic fades and we have a little bit of a reprieve from this global situation?
Yeah, that's why you're so right, I think, in reminding us that the starting points has to be proximity and relationship. As Mother Teresa said, there's a lot of people that talk. It may be very fashionable to talk about the poor, but not as fashionable to talk to them. We can talk about immigrants, but not know our immigrant neighbors. And so proximity is everything. And that's what the coronavirus has done, right? It's proximate, like it's in our face. Recently, I just heard pretty much everybody in New York is going to know someone who died from the pandemic. It's very likely anyway. And so this is personal to us. And I think the invitation of Jesus and why he says, when you do it to the least of these, you do it to me, is that this is personal to God. When other people suffer, especially from stupid, senseless suffering in our world that we can prevent, like God takes that personally. So I think we could walk away from this saying, man, let's keep leaning in to those who are hurting, so that it's as urgent as the pandemic, right? That when immigrant kids are in cages, like, that matters to me, and I need to be more proximate to that, because if that's just an issue I hear on the news of like mass incarceration, like is just numbers and statistics, or even an issue to debate, like that's a problem. Many of these issues, they are not just numbers; they are people that are made in the image of God. And I think when we see it as that, it creates a different urgency. And that's why I think one of Jesus's most radical ideas is that we are born again. And now we have a compassion that is not confined to our family or nationalism or our nationality, but like if another person suffers, it's as tragic as if that was our own flesh and blood, our own mom or dad or child. And that's how we should remember it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's easy to be compassionate, or actually it's not the concern is a selfish concern, because I could get infected, or my economic security has been changed. I can't do what I used to do. And so I think that's where it's, we just need a revival. I mean, we need
totally. Yeah.
I've been praying for a long time, that we'd have like a Jesus movement, like there was back in the 70s. A lot of our listeners, don't know about that because they're too young, but we need that. We need something real. It's got to be more than just okay, I care about the needs of the world. It doesn't happen unless it's a supernatural thing. I mean, and you're a great example, Shane, and a hero to me because of that. I think you're, and it's really an honor to have you on our podcast, but I think that's what we need, is because as soon as this, I'm afraid that as soon as this pandemic ends, we'll go back, the big W, we will go back to our selfishness again. And I don't want that. I don't want to go through all this and all these people, all the bad things that are happening, and to be the same at the end, And so that's something. This is something I'm really saying, God, let this do something deep in me. Let it do something deep in Jesus followers around the world,
Yeah.
because we don't have a lot of time. I don't know. Yeah, we don't have a lot of time, and this kind of reminds me of that, and it just makes me want to be more urgent, at being Jesus to this world that's so broken. So these are some of my random thoughts on that.
No, totally. As you were saying that, I was thinking, you were talking about, the self-interest and the me rather than the we kind of framework. But the interesting thing is Jesus says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. It's not that you don't matter. It's that your neighbor matters too. And they matter just as much as you do. So I think, some people that I see out there just giving themselves away, they would do well to love themselves as they love their neighbor, because sometimes we can neglect that. But for a lot of us, I think we're good at loving ourselves, and we need to extend that concern outside of our own little circle. And that's why things like the Black Lives Matter movement have kind of reminded us of that. If you can't say Black Lives Matter, you probably don't believe that all lives matter, right? Like, we really need to be able to specifically say, especially those people that our country has, and our histories have made invisible and less than human and erased from history. Like, those people matter to God, and they should matter to us. So I think, holding those together is good. Like, we should love ourselves. God loves us, but we also got to extend that love to others. And when we just kind of end up in these these worlds of ourselves, we're very lonely, empty people, and that's why Jesus says, if you want to find yourself, give yourself away. We were made to live for something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, no, I'm reading a book by Dallas Willard, The Renovation of the Heart. And one thing that I love what he says is, it's similar to what you said in terms of we have value. We lose our life to really find something better. It's not this we give everything up and then it's kind of this self-abasing life. God has something better. And so the counterfeit version of life that we're living now is not as good as the life God has for us. So yes, we give up our control, the thing that we, the desire to define our own reality for something so much better. And so, the quote unquote sacrifice or the transformation that God would want to do in us as a result of the situation that we're going through, is for our good. Is that we come out of the other end of it not so deceived, not living for ourselves, not so myopic on the things that we want. This is for our ultimate good. And so that's where there is this full understanding of what it means to lose yourself for God's sake, because he has an amazing life that's so much better than this counterfeit thing that the world offers us, right?
Totally. Yeah, man.
Yeah. A couple of decent questions here. Matt Cram, who's a regular listener to the podcast, one thing he does say, maybe we could just real quickly practically touch on this. He mentions the idea that, the coronavirus, as we said, is so proximate, whereas hunger, suicide, gun violence, all these things are less proximate. Practically, what can we do? I mean, again, as David said, it's not a matter of the will in the sense of there is the will component, but it's not a religious thing where it's like, I'm going to start caring about these things starting tomorrow. What can we do? How do we not become, let's say this fades, and it will. How do we not become overwhelmed and say, well, I'm going to solve all problems now? What is just a few practical steps people can take so that they have some lasting impact from the thing that we've been going through together?
Yeah, well, as I think of the other issues, the gun violence and the other those things, that they are about people, and you can't care about everything, but you can control. Many of us can control who we're in relationship to, and we can try to build relationship with communities outside of our kind of homogenous circles. And one of my friends, Alexia Salvatierra, she's a great woman, organizer, author. And she says, privilege is being able to choose what issues you care about. Because there's a lot of people that these issues choose them every day, and so I think that's where that relationship matters. And to me, we have a theology of place, choosing a neighborhood, and especially a neighborhood that suffered a lot of the inequities and injustices of our world. And then the issues kind of choose you as you live there and live among the people. So, but I think we can build friendships with folks who are already, writing folks on death row or going into prisons or working with, our hospitality to immigrants and asylum seekers. So I don't think sometimes the hardest part of running a marathon isn't getting to the finish line. It's getting to the starting line. It's going like, I just got to start somewhere. So go where you already see people doing it.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's great. I think that's right. Start small. Like you said, you just take a step, and I hope that when this whole pandemic ends, that I can come to Philly and see what you're doing there, Shane. It'd be really
cool.
I'd
love it, man.
Yeah.
And people keep saying like, I can't wait till the pandemic's over so we can get back to normal. But I've also heard some people say really beautifully, normal wasn't working, so hopefully after this, it actually causes us to, rethink some things, and maybe we can not like move back, but move forward and go like, let's rethink a number of things. And I think our whole world's going to be different. And hopefully some of that difference will be really, really beautiful things that surface during the pandemic.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you, Shane. Sorry about the technical glitch, but you did experience a historical moment. How did Luke do? Do you think he did all right? Did he handle his solo moment okay? Or was he just a nervous wreck? You
better be careful, because folks might watch that and then they're just like, oh, I don't think we need those other guys.
Oh, and also, I did get a text from Nigel, Shane, your number one fan, Nigel.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, and he just said that he was angry with me for suggesting that you work at a bank, and so he just wanted to say that he was not happy, and he might withdraw his support now because of that.
Oh yeah. Well, we got to remember Jesus had some tax collectors on board. It wasn't just the zealots he brought in, but so we got to leave room for anybody, man. Leave room at the table.
Yeah.
That's true. That's
Ton,
true.
at least you have one fan, Ton. Wait, no, Luke. Ton is your one fan.
Thank you, Ton.
That's what I wanted to say.
Love
Antonius.
you,
all right, Shane. Thank you so much.
So good. Let's do it again, y'all. I'll always love it. Yeah. Thanks for everybody listening.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, it'd be great to have you on more often. It's really great to hear from you, and I look forward to seeing you in the flesh sometime.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Keep at it.
Love
Yeah.
you, brother.
Hey, just let you guys know,
man.
if you want to listen to this podcast, it will be out tomorrow. You can listen to all past podcasts by going to it's on Come and Live, Provoke and Inspire, or you can just type it into Google, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. Find the previous episodes, rate it, review it. You can support us there. Join our Provoke and Inspire podcast community page on Facebook, and keep joining our Hope Beyond Fear movement. Shane, if you want to post something online, something encouraging, something pithy, and you want to use that hashtag Hope Beyond Fear, we've been using that all over the world to send inspiring messages and to remind people that we need to keep our eyes on Jesus at a moment like this. So we'd appreciate that, and we'll talk to you next time. Peace.
Love you, man.
You are listening to the Lockdown live stream, a special edition Provoke and Inspire episode.